invite.
I got your back.
Awesome. You're the best. Well, I had the first three items of the agenda. It's great to see everyone. It's been a while since I've seen this group, but I'll be helping support while Harris is out for the next few weeks. So I will be doing everything I can from a product standpoint to support y'all. And I wanted to start by getting a pulse check on kind of planning readiness for 13.3. Harris went ahead and created the 13.3 planning issue, which was great to see. But I wanted to get a pulse check from this group to see kind of what needed to be accomplished to make sure that we have the groomed issues ready for that milestone. To me, it looks like we do have a good chunk of issues ready to development, but the direction issues could use a little bit more refinement. I wanted to call out the group migration issue and also internationalization automation, but I also wanted to feel free to highlight other issues that I can kind of help refine. So I wanted to start with the group migration issue because I think that is probably one of the more important direction issues. And when I click into this thread here, it seems like we're still kind of in discussion in terms of kind of how to handle that. We have this vision here on the full group migration solution. And we had a couple of, like George has a ton of information here, which is awesome. And Harris had a couple of suggestions here. So I'll shut up for a minute. Liam, how should we kind of approach this issue, you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I see Harris has just joined us as well. Hi, Harris. So I spoke to Harris about this in our one-on-one last week. And I think that sort of the outcome we came to is there's two ways to approach this. One is there's this whole technical vision, which I think we're still trying to build, which is the idea of that brainstorming issue. But at the same time, I think there's quite a clear path we want from a product point of view with this take me to the cloud button. Now, I'm hoping over the next couple of weeks we can get the conversation going further in that issue that you just shared from a technical point of view. To cover like all of the, I guess, functional and non-functional requirements. But I think there's also probably things we can do in the interim to actually start making progress towards where we want to get to. So two of the things that Harris and I spoke about last week was, is it possible to introduce this, like what we've called the take me to the cloud button, which it's, from a user's point of view, it's fairly seamless. You click it and kind of in the background, it just does something. And that's something I think can be defined. It tries to replicate the current process that we have now. Or it could be something really, really lightweight. So you have like a take me to the cloud button and it will, and we kind of decided whether that should exist, for example, in your self-managed instance or on gitlab.com. And all it would basically do is it would take some parameters such as the endpoint, maybe some sort of authentication information, and it would just basically do something really simple like kick off the group import export API and do nothing more. So it's just like a really, really simple first step to like prove how it could work from a customer point of view. And I guess as it's all sort of UI based at the moment, we can then like iteratively over time make all the technical changes that we want to in the background. So I think in terms of what we do in 13.3, I think we continue the technical conversation and try to come up with some concrete actions which we can prioritize over future milestones. But I think we need to agree on kind of what the proof of concepts or the spikes, as we were calling them, should be over the next few weeks. Harris, I don't know if you, sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
No, I had a question, which was, I'm obviously new to the scope of work here, but one thing that I'm curious about is, do we kind of understand the requirements from kind of product to be able to understand kind of which objects that we want to import? Does it make sense to maybe start with like a subset of objects and focus on, say, users in the first iteration and kind of iterate from there? Or is there another way that we should kind of be thinking about how product can kind of help manage the scope of the first iteration?
Jeremy, just want to make sure you guys can hear me because I have really glitchy video at this point. Good. So I've proposed two different approaches, and in that issue that you're laying, one is sort of described, and that is taking the current capabilities that we have and just wrapping them into a user experience that is more alike the other importers. So taking that file-based migration and just wrapping in a nicer kind of a UX. And the other approach is what you're describing, and that is taking the smallest, the thinnest slice that we can take across using a new framework. So building a framework that is not file-based, that is kind of an API to API. And I've sort of described both of those as possible MVCs. And what I've proposed is to actually do both of those. I would like for us to, in the first spikes or in the first couple of iterations, try both approaches, see which one works better, what the pros and cons are each one of them, because this is a very big project, and I don't know that we can right now, ahead of trying anything, is the right kind of technical approach that we should take. So I'd be willing to entertain trying a couple different spikes, trying multiple approaches at the same time, and then either picking a winner, picking what seems to be working best, like, it's possible that we like one or the other better, or talking about how to combine the two approaches and what we learn from both to come up with some hybrid approach that makes most sense for us. So I feel like all of that is still open up in the air. Does that make sense, Jared?
Makes total sense. So what I wrote in the agenda was maybe we create a 13.3 issue to represent the engineering spike. We leave the MVC aside for now, and then we find a DRI for that exploration. And they can either choose to pursue one of those or both of those POCs in 13.3.
That makes sense.
Cool. I think that's a great idea. In regard,
available. I've put that MVC issue as a pull-out.
Sorry,
go
Harris,
ahead.
I think we
go ahead.
Like there. So I think that's a great idea. But in terms of those sort of both those two approaches, I guess we do we want to clarify kind of like what the spike should be, or do we want to leave that to kind of like be as part of the exploration? So what I mean by that, in the first example, we can wrap up the current experience, but we can do that in multiple ways, right? We can decide that the process is initiated from the target instance, or we could basically say that the process starts at the origin instance. And then probably the same thing goes to the second one, whereby we're talking about creating a very, very simple importer based on the API only approach. What do we start with there? Do we start with, just as Jeremy said, users? Do we start with just groups? Do we start with a subset of groups? So I guess some product direction there as to where maybe we would get the most value would probably be helpful.
Yeah, so I think we should, like, if we're going to do two approaches, and one is just wrapping the file-based experience in a better user experience, and then also doing the approach where we're going to pick one object to come across, but using the new and the like reliable, restartable, better framework that we talked about. I think one of those should be a push and one of those should be a pull. So one of those should be take me to the cloud experience. The other one should be I have somewhere else files or things that I left behind, and I'm in a new instance now, and I want to pull those across. So I think having those two spikes going in two different directions might teach us about each one of those, what we want to know, so that we can pick the right thing. What I have proposed, and I'm open definitely to changing this, is issues. So I said something for the thin, let's just pick one small thing that we know how to do. I've suggested we just mimic the comma separate value importer. The CSV importer just brings the title and description across. So that's, I think, okay for a spike to do, because these are really simple. And, I don't expect any kind of issues to arise from that. I actually like the idea of users, what Jeremy mentioned, because that's something that we don't have. I am a little afraid of that being the first spike, because I know there's some sensitivities around users and usernames, and I feel like the spike may be wrapped up into things that are not technical in nature, but more of just process and answering questions. So that's my take on it. Again, like I really, when I'm here, like what do you think is feasible within a milestone? Like how many or what things can be accomplished in a milestone, so that at the end of 13.3, we have learned some things and we can paint sort of a better path forward.
That makes sense to me, Harris. Like users is probably not the right place to start if your goal is simplicity in the first iteration. So I'll go ahead and create that engineering spike issue. I'll take a crack at it, and then I'll share it with you asynchronously. We can kind of refine together. But we'll that sounds like a great next step. Cool. I also had a question around internationalization automation. Josie, I'd really appreciate your take here. In that issue, the last comment that you had was it sounded like progress was previously kind of stalled because there wasn't an API available from Crowdin that we could use. Are there any other, has that changed in the 5 months? Are there other issues we could tackle in the meanwhile? What is your take in kind of the next step here?
So I checked the API is still in beta, but I think the points that I put in the second comment are all still valid. And those are little things that we could tackle that would help speed up the process anyway. Although looking at it today, I was thinking maybe we should have a spike first, because these are mostly guesses of things that I think will speed up the process. I'm not actually sure how you would run a script like this outside of the project. So that would be something that needs investigating. Maybe that could be the first thing we pull in to the milestone.
Yeah, I had those little comments that you put there in mind when I asked, like, what is the next thing we can do? I want to do a couple of those little things that I know move us forward. I was thinking those manual steps that we have to do every time we pull things across, where like the comment, like is it a commit title or commit comment that is just correct format, and it creates like 60 danger bot warnings. So things like that we can potentially change would be good to attack. I just want to keep making progress. I don't want us to stall. So if these are things we can do now, I'd like to pick up one or a few of those.
Yep, I agree. I just need to verify how you would actually run this, because I'm not familiar with how to run stuff in like a scheduled job that's not in the GitLab project but operates on the GitLab project.
Would you mind taking that on and then fleshing out an issue or two before the planning? Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks a lot, Josie. That was going to be the next question. I really appreciate it. Cool. So that's awesome. I just wanted to also verify my understanding on our process. It sounds like the goal is to pull ready for dev issues out of the next 1 to 3 into 13.3. I was a little confused about how many issues we pull in, if that is the case, whether or not we do that based on team velocity. But Harris, since you're here, you'll definitely know.
I think this is one of those that the team could answer probably better.
Cool. Liam, Dennis, what's your take on that?
Cassio?
Everyone is so quiet today. So what we did the last releases was basically based on the historical team velocity, plus the idea of not overpick issues to avoid having extra issues at the end of the release. So I think we had a comment somewhere, I don't remember in what issue now, that for this time we would try to leave some space for work in issues outside of what's planned. So it's a complex equation that goes historical velocity minus open space for non-planned issues and something like that.
That's super helpful. Thanks, Kasia. Sounds like I got it mostly right, but that's great to know that we have some space for unplanned issues.
Yeah, we've been fairly consistent over the last few milestones in terms of number of issues. We were actually discussing, I think, in last week's team meeting that we're probably at a point now where we've collected enough weight data as well to see how that kind of marries up and whether we should start using that instead. So I can look into that. I'll talk a bit more about it in a minute actually, but I've started to build some dashboards to make some of this stuff easier as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, an extra input that we are trying to remind every time is if everyone has a planned vacation or something like that, that could impact on the velocity of the team. Just a reminder.
Great point. Keep that in mind. Cool. Thanks for the discussion. I really appreciate it, y'all. Are there any other issues that we're aware of that kind of need some product involvement? Feel free. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Jeremy. Having spoke to Harris last week, I think one of the things we spoke about in terms of directional issues was what we can do with regards to some of the GitHub importer stuff, so that we're in a better position a couple of months down the line when we need to invest hopefully more time in that. I think at the moment there's some issues around kind of like performance, dealing with some bugs and things like that we'll probably try to pull in. As far as I'm aware, I think most of them are sort of ready to be picked up. I don't think there's a huge amount of involvement needed in them at the moment.
Yeah, I also feel like they're ready to be picked up, but I'll take another pass at them and start moving them into the 13.3 milestone as kind of needed. Amanda, are you good on your end?
Yeah, I was just about to update the agenda. Yeah, I can briefly talk about what my plan is for actually the rest of this milestone as well as 13.3. So I'll be working on the pagination and search. So if there's anything I need to do from a UX standpoint, I'll be working on that this milestone so that it's ready for 13.3. And then I'm going to be creating issues around discoverability of import, scalability, so how do we handle large imports, and I'll be creating an issue around ease of use. And as well as I have interviews this week that I'm going to be working on, as well as synthesizing those interviews. And I think that's it, as far as I know.
Awesome. That sounds great. When you say pagination and search, do you mean like for individual project importers like Bitbucket, GitHub?
I need to do a little bit more investigating.
We have issued for the GitHub importer. So that's the one that we were trying to get into 13.3. And that's one of the issues that I think Liam and Dennis could help me with, making sure that we do get to that, is getting the GitHub importer pagination implemented. And that's important for our scaling of the GitHub importer, which is going to be needed for our big project soon, to be able to handle, like 4,000 projects being loaded into a possible list of projects for you to pick from. That issue has actually been broken up into, I believe, 4 or 5 different issues, and they are in various stages of ready. So some of those may get picked up, not all of them may, depending on how far we get with refinement. I would prefer if we could refine them all, and then during the planning, see if we can actually load them all into the same milestone, or is the dependency, are there really hard dependencies where we need to wait another milestone for those dependencies to be solved? I know there are dependencies between some of those. I just don't know if they could be like sequenced into a milestone, or does it require 2 milestones? I think that's where we are with that big issue. And I don't have the issue with me, but it's been definitely broken up, and it's in the right spot for everybody to refine each individual piece. There's a front end piece, there's a backend piece to use the GitHub API instead of our own backend for paging, so that we would only pull from the GitHub API what we need, as opposed to pull everything and then we kind of sort down our end. And then there's the issue to finally implement the pagination. So all of those are linked in the planning. I think they're linked off of the planning issue for 13.3. And since I'm talking and again, I seem to have a good connection. I'm a little disappointed in the team not having corrected the what Jeremy said. So Jeremy, I'm going to correct you. As a matter of process, the team will pull issues into 13.3 during the planning call. You said you would be putting issues into 13.3, but that's really, as part of our process, we'd let, team will pick those issues into 13.3 during the planning. And I don't know, maybe the team was intimidated and want to speak against you, Jeremy. I don't know what's happening. Yeah.
Maybe
no one said anything. I'm like, there's a faux pas.
Does that match up with everyone's understanding of how things work? I mean, I'd be curious to know how others kind of understand and feel about the process.
Yeah, just since I'm working on the front end part of the making pagination for GitHub importer right now, just my feeling, it seems too risky to try to pull everything in the one milestone, because it will require a number of backend work, number of front-end work, and obviously some effort to glue things together. And I believe it's very easy to miss the milestone if, for example, the backend work will take up to the end of milestone and we will simply have no time to make sure that things are properly tied together with front-end and backend. Because right now we are doing some changes on the front-end part. This is planned for this milestone and will be delivered. But it's just my feeling. It's just like a side note.
With regards to your comment, Harris, I think it's because you're driving the planning meeting, and so we're sharing your screen. You're literally the one pulling it in. But yes, we do work as a group to pull it in together.
Got it. So as a new person to the process, how should we handle that planning, that process? Next, should we maybe next import meeting when we have this kind of a full meeting, should we handle that then synchronously, or should we handle that asynchronously? Like what's the recommendation here?
Yeah, so historically we've always had a dedicated call to go over planning. I think that's been quite helpful. One of the things that we have spoke about recently, I think it's mentioned in most recent retrospective, was we're at a point now where we should probably try to do more of kind of like the planning readiness asynchronously, so that on the call it's more of a review, more of a call out anything that you're concerned with, maybe go into a bit of detail on some of the sort of bigger directional issues. But it's more about kind of like final comments rather than kind of like a continuation of the process. So I mean, I would suggest that we put a call in. We have kind of like, we don't change too much from how we've been working. So we put a call in next week. If we can do anything ahead of time, great. And then we'll kind of just sort of close things out during the call.
Harris pointed out it's scheduled for the 15th. I prefer if we could do something on or before the 13th to try to get it a little bit finalized before the milestone ends. But yeah, I would definitely agree on trying to have a little bit more planning readiness ahead of time, because we've spent a lot of time during the planning meeting, which I think was typically 30 minutes, but can extend to itself into an hour. And we'll during that planning meeting actually be refining issues for certain things that are priority that we wanted to try to get into that milestone.
Before the 13th would mean this week then, because 13th is Monday.
Correct.
Cool. Thanks very much. Harris, would you mind trying to see if we can find some time this week to be able to meet, maybe on Friday?
I can move the meeting to Friday, and to make sure that everybody's okay with having just a few more days to refine everything we need to refine. So just speak up now or in the planning issue to call out anything that's directional and we thought was important but might not be able to be refined by Friday, and then we can maybe put some effort on that.
Could we potentially just have a meeting
one
on Monday, since we're trying to experiment with no meetings on Friday?
Yes, Dennis, what he said.
Thank you. I forgot.
Okay, I'll just expand. I'll cancel then our weekly meeting that's on Monday morning and replace it with the planning meeting on Monday. Is that okay?
Works for me.
Sounds great. Cool. Thanks very much, all. I really appreciate the help. Liam, I think you have the last item.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeremy. I'll just quickly run through this with the 2 minutes that we have spare. A few people have already seen this. I created a dashboard as well for Access. That was actually the reason for creating it in the first place, was to get a better view of the security backlog in Access. I spent a bit of time earlier this afternoon modifying it so that it would work for import as well. It's quite hard coded at the moment, so I need to kind of like play around with filters and stuff. But I'm trying to get like a common view that we can use and maybe check in like once a week on the weekly call, just a quick like 30 or 60-second overview as to where we are, to make sure that things like the security backlog is actually going down and not going up. To call out whether there's any concerns with throughput or kind of like long running merge requests and things like that. So I would advise everyone to kind of like bookmark lists, keep a constant eye on it. It's a good reminder for everyone probably, like there are like long running MRs open and maybe things that we can talk about in the retrospectives as well. Also related to this, and I don't think we're going to be able to go into too much detail with a minute left, but one of the OKRs that was set for this quarter was around increasing throughput across all of the teams and groups. But one of the ones that I set specifically for import was to move up from 5.6 to 9.1, so it's a 20% increase. Actually, it was more than that for import. I think it was a 20% increase for Access, but I felt as if import should probably get to the same level as Access. I don't think there's any reason import should have lower throughput. So I think throughout the next weeks, I don't, given the numbers, given where we were last month, I don't think we're going to achieve that. But I would say let's use the next few weeks to think about maybe why that is, to think about what we could do differently. This has been a conversation I've had in Access as well. Like if we're working on some like proof of concepts that don't make it through to .con, they don't get merged, then obviously that's not going to count towards throughput. Now, I don't think that counts as wasted time. But at the same time, in fact, very much the contrary, the whole point of those is to hopefully sort of save us time and add value later on. But are those initiatives kind of like meaning that we're not able to hit those throughput numbers, and is there anything else we need to do or need to consider to start kind of seeing an increase towards that? Or do people just think it's completely unrealistic? And if so, like I asked everyone just to call it out, and we can have a conversation as to why that is. So maybe just something to have a think about, like throughout July, in terms of while we're trying to hit that goal, if we're not able to, then kind of what's preventing us from doing so.
Liam, maybe we should just create an issue in the manage general discussion about this, and then if you could maybe over the as the month wraps up, consider posting some statistics in there, because I'd be really curious if like some groups are hitting this. Like I know that compliance is very productive, and so if some groups are doing really well, maybe we can learn from them and start iterating towards what they're doing right, and kind of use their process and how they work as inspiration. But just a thought. It's something we can kind of optimize on across the whole stage.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to take that.
Yeah, I like just to wait and see how things end up in the quarter and kind of do a retrospective on it, because we'll have, every group kind of has a little bit of a different flavor in terms of the work they have to do with security issues or more ideation or proof of concept. So if anything, it's still good to be aspirational to try to improve the group's throughput by 20%. But if we find that, these POCs were necessary and we've already done the necessary time boxing, then that's just a good takeaway to have. I'm hesitant to say compliance is more productive, or to say that, because, I think we're still being productive. And to Liam's point, we're trying to do those proof of concepts to avoid any overwork or wasted work. So if that results in a lower throughput, then I think that's something we're okay with.
Yeah, I agree. And I over accentuated like productivity. I meant to say there are deltas between the groups. Let's ask the question why. That's all.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right, Dennis. I think when we first started measuring this quite a while ago, we just called it productivity. We didn't call it throughput. And there was quite a lot of sort of negative feedback around that for the reason that you just said. But at the same time, there is an expectation that all teams are going to have like the same throughput, which is kind of set as a company-wide OKR. So as Jeremy said, it would be good to find out if that's not achievable in certain teams and groups, then why not? So we can specifically call it out.
Cool. Thank you all so much. We're a little over time. Great seeing you all. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.